3 years ago, I watched Knives Out Glass Onion for the first time in a sold out theater, and it would probably still be up there for one of my favorite film experiences ever. The crowd was respectful and engaged the entire time. The darkness of the theater removed them from my own peripheral vision, allowing me to be locked into the projection of the film, which is the only thing illuminating the theater room. Created my own personal relationship with the film, surrounded by people who all equally engaged with it in different ways, while the film discusses themes appealing to public realities. It was magnificent. A few weeks ago, I had a similar film watching experience happen with the new Knives Out film, Wake Up Dead Man. Again, I went out of my way to see this film in the only theater showing it in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was rewarded by watching the film's dazzling cinematography and expert storytelling in the place best for it, a packed cinema. Just last Saturday, this film came out on Netflix. My family wanted to watch it, and my brain instantly switched into high gear. You see, I'm a film fan, which means that I'm about as shocked, scared, and disgusted as you all are with the Netflix acquisition of Warner Brothers. Studios have swallowed up other studios before. However, a content producing company for individual customers at their easiest convenience, swallowing up one of the biggest film studios in cinematic history, who is still producing future classics like Sinners, Weapons, and One Battle After Another, was a tough pill to swallow. Therefore, I thought to myself, I will make a video comparing my incredible film watching experience for Wake Up Dead Man and the automatically worse experience I had watching it at home. And yet, I enjoyed Wake Up Dead Man just as much, if not even more, when I watched it at home. Look, I could lie to you and make a video doing the same comparison and telling you that watching it at home was worse than watching it in the theater. But to truly get at the root of why I love cinema and why I think the movie theater is one of the most important institutions today, I would have to dig deeper. The answer to my question of why I love movies and why I think it is important requires the basic scratching of the surface of film theory and a reflection of film history as well. When the motion pictures first came around as an invention, people did not see it as an art form. They were first viewed as amusements and spectacles. One controversial and horrifying film changed the game. I looked at old newspapers, and what I found was a change in the way cinema was advertised at the turn of the century. Cinema turned from a quick, cheap entertainment spectacle to an emotional, moving art form experienced both privately and publicly. It is not the death of the theater that is killing cinema, it is the death of the communal public and private experience that is killing the movies. Of course, capturing motion on film was one thing, exhibiting it to the public was another. That is where the kinetoscope came in. The kinetoscope was an early film viewing device where individual customers could look through a small peephole and watch a small film ranging from a few seconds to under a few minutes. Exhibiting videos such as a sneeze, these films were mostly interested in capturing motion for the sake of it and less worried about being art. These were spectacles meant to divert the public's attention for a few minutes. As impressive the invention of exhibiting films was, something was missing. Of course, one thing was practicality. Individuals coming in to put in coins to watch meaningless video is of course a bad business model, right? Multiple devices were also needed, which is why kinetoscope parlors, where crowds could rush in and get their cheap thrill and move on, were created. The early days of the motion picture was merely a cheap spectacle trick, which of course audiences would lose interest in after a year or two. I would argue, however, that the weaknesses of the kinetoscope comes mostly from the fact that it is completely individualized amusement, where people look through a peephole for their entertainment. They aren't sharing their experience with anyone as they are locked in on images looking down at a machine, so the experience is fleeting. Thomas Edison, inventor of kinetoscopes, seemed to agree. Written in the St. Paul Daily Globe in 1894, Edison saw the potential of his invention for cinematic projections. He said, quote, "I expect to be able to reproduce a whole opera showing people on the stage in their natural size and moving around, and to make their voices heard just as they sang and talked. This I will do by throwing the scenes from a kinetoscope on a large screen by means of a stereopticon, and having the sounds issue from a phonograph at the proper moment to comport with the movements of those who made them." Edison gives us a hint in his dreams for the future of the kinetoscope. In his quote here, he basically describes a vision of modern cinema. However, he talks about exhibiting it to people, showing the people, so that people. Edison's vision of the theater is, of course, not one giant room for one person, but an exhibition for multiple people to be entranced by a large screen and clear sound. Why else would he dream of a large space to exhibit motion pictures for his kinetograph? He envisions it for a group of people. Edison's dream of blowing up tiny images of the kinetoscope became a reality with the cinematograph, an early projection system which looks more like a primitive version of our projection systems today. Eden Musée, a wax museum in New York popular during the late 19th century, exhibited the cinematograph. Beginning in 1898, scenes from the Passion Play of... I'm not even going to attempt that. Totaling 20 minutes, was produced by Thomas Edison's production company and was exhibited in the museum. Advertising in the New York Journal in 1899, Eden Musee's cinematograph exhibition was listed under amusements. Quotes from the media used within the advert suggest how the cinematograph's exhibition belongs in the amusement section. Quote, the children made a decidedly favorable impression and will doubtless attract many visitors to this popular place. The New York Times, quote, the display was both in every respect interesting and held the attention of spectators from beginning to end. Both these quotes in the advert shows how the cinematograph's role in being a mere spectacle to divert attention, experienced with both children and the general public. However, the Brooklyn Citizen said, one would prophesize that those who came to scoff will remain to pray. Seems like a rousing success for a mere amusement of a filmed play recreating the Passion of Jesus Christ. A critic for Mail and Express also wrote, after the exhibition was over, I left feeling like living a better life, becoming a better man, trying to follow the teachings of him whom I now know as I never knew before. The cinematograph exhibition at Eden Musée was not a cheap amusement for some. Some entered that crowded, dark theater and were deeply impacted by the images they saw. Despite some audiences being moved all the way back in 1899 at Eden Musee's exhibit, news presses around the nation kept printing their advertisements for the cinematograph exhibits under amusements. The placement of these ads suggests how people viewed cinema like a public version of the kinetoscope, watching images without artistic merit to be merely amused for a few minutes. The difference, however, was the fact that these exhibitions were in public. Edwin S. Porter's The Trainwrecker in 1905, played in various smaller theaters called Nickelodeons, was described as bringing in good patronage. Additionally, the Nickelodeon itself was called a refined art form for women, children, and men in an advertisement for the Trainwreckers. I argue that it is the fact they are being projected in public which produces this change in perspective. People are beginning to experience a motion picture in rooms only illuminated by the projection of the images themselves, sharing it with friends, family, and strangers. That change will only become clear once a large feature film took the nation by storm. The Birth of a Nation is a horribly racist film that literally led to the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan in the United States. Much has been written about the dangerous influence this film had, and I suggest you read and watch people who have researched this film more deeply. I'm not trying to ignore the horrible nature of this film. However, reviews and advertisements for this film are good for studying the change in the perspective of cinema because it is a watershed moment which birthed many modern film techniques. But just as a clear disclaimer, I do not agree with any of the opinions of those writing back during the film's release. I think The Birth of a Nation is a horrifyingly racist stain on cinema, and I will link sources talking about that in the bio. Director D.W. Griffith knew what he was doing. He was making a different film. Being interviewed in the New York Tribune in 1915 ahead of the film's premiere, Griffith talks about the incredible work that went into the first film of its kind. Griffith aims to create the first of its kind large recording of a story in which modern editing techniques, shooting techniques, and acting techniques all contribute to making the biggest spectacle possible. D.W. Griffith was not making a mere spectacle. He believed he was contributing to a true art form surpassing performance art on stage. His art, however, must be exhibited for multiple people in well-equipped theaters. His film would not work on the kinetograph, nor would it even work in smaller Nickelodeons. A high $2 price tag for nearly 3-hour experience was unheard of for a motion picture, being played in theaters reserved for live performances. Early advertisements for this film advertised like Eden Musée and other motion picture exhibits of the time. They advertised the spectacle and amusement. Stats such as the film's $500,000 price tag, the nearly 20,000 people who worked on it, and the nearly 3,000 horses who were used on the film clearly targeted advertisements for audiences who viewed motion pictures as simple amusement. The Birth of a Nation was advertised as the largest spectacle on steroids to draw crowds in and justify a hefty $2 price tag for a mere amusement. Those who saw the film, however, shows the birth of the public and individual experience. Gerald Mast, a film historian, wrote an essay titled Projection that perfectly describes what I mean. Talking about the projection of cinema, Mast says, the experience is both private and public at the same time. The projected images speak to our personal dreams and fantasies and seem to depict the public and familiar realities. The birth of this public-private experience is seen with The Birth of a Nation. The Sun printed an advertisement for the film's release that boasts the spectacular stats that I listed before. However, they included a review of Dorothea Dix, a self-described film fan. Dix wrote that she was skeptical of the lack of sound. However, the large scope and massive film drama made for a deeply emotional experience. She found the film to be incredible, speaking about her own personal relationship between the previous plays and books describing the Civil War and how The Birth of a Nation was different. The ending of her review, however, puts it back to the public. She has said, "And finally, go and see it because it will make you a better American." The film has not only spoke to her personally, but spoke to the public realities of a nation coming off the heels of a civil war. After a year in theater, this public and private experience, which defines cinema, has changed advertisements for the film. Instead of listing the impressive stats of the film, newspapers in December of 1950 includes opinions from mayors talking about how the film is important to see both as a spectacle and as an instructive look into the nation's history. The mayor of Richmond both includes his perspective and the public he saw it with as well. The inclusion of both these perspectives signals a change from advertisement to a thrill-seeking public to a public wanting to experience an art form individually in a dark communal room like the cinema. The days of advertising the spectacle and cheap amusement sections of the newspapers are over. The cinema's ability to capture an individual audience goer's attention while speaking to public realities together with a group of people allowed cinema to be perceived as a true art form. Cinema is both private and public. It is clear that during the development of projecting films, they all made steps leading toward dark rooms illuminated by the images of a director's films, where an individual audience member can lock into the film like he would with a kinetograph, surrounded by people all watching the same thing. Cinema is not an individualized art form. It is a communal one, and that is what makes it so special. Netflix, streaming, and other home video releases seem to get the wrong message. Of course, a film in a theater does not inherently increase the intrinsic quality of a film. Yes, you can watch Lawrence of Arabia on your phone and still get the exact same movie. However, the experience will be inherently different. You will be experiencing that film publicly if you watch it in a theater, with people who are all individually creating relationships with that movie without any room for breaks like the unknown light creating a reflection in your phone or laptop screen, pausing, or the ability to just throw it on in the background. Theaters center around cinema's quality of the public and private. Yet, we have moved closer to the kinetograph style of entertainment, each watching short videos tailored to us individually. The theater remains important today, especially as we become more isolated, watching individualized things that our algorithm tells us to watch. I encourage you to go see something in a theater this holiday season and really reflect on the differences you feel in the theater versus watching it at home. Reflecting on your movie-going experience in the cinema will save the movies from becoming a completely individualized content slop fest. Thank you as always for watching. More videos are going to be coming soon.